Coming up on this week's show, the Game Boy with a 100-year battery life.
A 37-year-old game Easter egg is discovered.
And we get the story of Spy vs. Spy with Richard Spitalny.
The Retro Owl podcast is brought to you each week with our amazing mates at Bitmap Books. Check out their full range of retro gaming books, including the amazing The Art of Point-and-Click Adventure Games book, a celebration of one of the most loved genres in gaming. Featuring 500 pages, this hardback coffee table book is packed with the very best pixel art, interviews and classic scenes from the games that define this genre. Check that out and lots more on their website at bitmapbooks.co.uk. Hello and welcome to the Retro Hour podcast, episode number 285, your weekly dose of retro gaming and technology news with me, Dan Wood.
Me, Ravi Abbott.
And me, Joe Fox.
And a very warm welcome, literally, to the show that takes you behind the scenes of the world of retro video games with a healthy dose of nostalgia laid on for good luck as well. I must admit, though, recording this week's episode, I do miss the days when we did this podcast in a cool air-conditioned studio. It is so warm.
Oh God, I've had to turn the fan off as well because it was making so much noise. So I'm
Same.
even more melting for the podcast.
I was going to say, yeah, I've not got my fan on either, and I've got my windows closed because a couple of weeks ago, Dan was like, somebody farted on the podcast when we were recording, but it turned out it was a motorbike going by my window.
It was a man just walking by.
Yeah, it could have been.
Well, I mean, we are right in the middle of a heat wave here in the UK, and the sacrifices we make for this show, fans off, windows closed, it's kind of a bit of a game of Russian roulette. Who's going to be the first to pass out, I think, during this week's episode?
Oh, it'd definitely be me. I'm the fattest.
And I must admit, guys, don't want to freak you out or anything. I'm doing this week's show topless.
Oh,
just
wow.
putting it out there.
There we go. Well, you know what?
God, we don't have cams.
I'm not actually topless today, but Dan did drop me off in it on the Patreon Hangout the other night. He was like, oh, it's good to see Joe's got a top on.
The amount of people we get going, why don't you make it a video podcast? This is why. This is why we don't make this a video podcast. But actually, no, the lovely weather over the last few days that we've had, it has been brilliant for retro brighting. Don't know if you guys have done anything. I got my my Commodore 128, my 128. I was showing that off actually on our Hangout the other day that we did on Sunday night. The keys on it were so yellow, it resembles sweet corn.
It's weird because it's so hot that like I'd worry that you'd actually melt it or you'd get some warping or something. Like, how did you do it, Dan?
Well, I did the method you taught me, just the bee blonde, but I only did the keys because the keyboard was yellow, but the rest of the machine was okay. So just pop the keycaps off, put them out there. I didn't cover them up with anything. I just, did a healthy kind of covering of the bee blonde on there, enough to keep them, from drying out. Went out there every hour or so, just kind of topped them up and moved them around a little bit. So after about 5 hours, I mean, they look good as new now. But you are actually right, because I did see somebody on one of the retro computing Facebook pages who put his Commodore 64 out there. And you know that method we were talking about where you don't put any hydrogen peroxide or anything on, you just put it out in the sun. And it's meant to gradually
just done by the natural UV.
Yeah, sun brighting is something to call it. He tried to do that, left it out there all day while he went out. He came home and the Commodore 64 had melted, all the plastic. So, and I know there are parts of the world that are a lot warmer than the UK is right now. So if
It
you're
reminds me of my dad had to return this really late video back in the days, and he left it on the car dashboard on a really hot day. And we came back and the whole video cassette was melted.
Nice.
We've in our conservatory, a little bit off topic, but we have all candles in lanterns from when we got married like 4 years ago in our conservatory around the windowsills. So you got to think it's the conservatory, then it's in glass lanterns, and they're just puddles of wax.
They're gothic now.
Yeah, just gothic lanterns now, and they've literally been there for like 4 years, just melted in the sun.
Can't move them now.
Yeah, it's part of the house.
But yeah, I think tomorrow I'm going to get out there and get the Dreamcast looking all nice and original again, hopefully. But obviously, if you are doing any retro brighting, our advice is keep an eye on it, because, it can go horribly wrong. Now, we've got lots to talk about in this week's show, an incredible guest as well. Now, this week, we're going to be getting the story of a classic, Spy versus Spy.
Oh, yes. This was an amazing game, actually. And it was really popular on the C64, but it was on loads of systems. And
on everything, really, wasn't it, back in the day?
Yeah, and like Richard, he was really good with licensing. So we're also going to be talking about Boulder Dash, which was an absolutely huge title. And that got ported to everything, even had a Specky port, Boulder Dash. And we're we're also going to talk a bit Star Trek, because I love my Star Trek. So it's a really rounded interview,
Well, I guess this week is Richard Spitalny, and he's got a history in movies, hasn't he? Because we start the interview talking about Dolly Parton and Sylvester Stallone.
Yeah, he was working on a film which had Sylvester Stallone singing in it. I've got to watch this film.
What film's that?
It's called Rhinestone. He's like Sylvester Stallone singing with Dolly Parton.
I don't know that one. I thought you were going to say, like, what's the one, like, Stop or My Mum Will Shoot or something?
Suddenly turns into a musical.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's such an interesting story, and kind of it's kind of a journey on, him coming from like the Hollywood background through to the early days of the video games industry and all the interesting characters that he met along the way. You've got to hear the story about this guy who was a massive investor in Commodore, wasn't he? And he went to meet him. And this guy was just literally throwing money at them on the condition that they actually signed the contract there and then. They couldn't think about it or leave the room.
Like a typical Commodore hardcore kind of guy. But, his company, First Star Software, that he founded, it actually came from the Atari Program Exchange, and it was named after winning the Atari Star, and it was kind of, heralded as a really interesting company, and that funding helped them actually get onto this game production. And he wasn't a programmer, he wasn't a massive designer, but he'd produce these games like producing a movie and coming up with the ideas and getting the licenses, and it's a really interesting story actually.
And Spy versus Spy, obviously, I mean, like we said before, on every platform. I remember playing that on the Commodore 16, which, not many kind of major games got ported to that platform. And also, obviously, it was a big hit on the Apple II and the Commodore 64, was, it's really its home platform, the Atari home computers. And that was originally a comic strip in Mad Magazine, wasn't it? So that kind of background on it was really interesting. But also the fact that it was quite a complicated game for the time, I thought, kind of how he made that a bit more accessible is quite an interesting story.
Yeah, and the new version as well of Spy vs. Spy. We talk about that. So we cover a lot in this interview. Stay tuned for that one.
Yeah, so Ravi obviously has a bit of a Star Trek geeking out as well, because you're a massive Trekkie, Ravi. So, hang around for this one. Our special guest, Richard Spitalny, coming up on the Retro Hour podcast in around 20 minutes from now. Now, let's dive straight into the news stories this week. Lots to get through. What about this? Because remember back in the day when we had handheld consoles, might have had a Game Boy. The Game Boy, I think, was probably the best for battery life. I remember friends of mine that had the Atari Lynx and the Game Gear. You'd be lucky to get like an afternoon out of one of those. Whereas the Game Boy, you can maybe get a weekend out of it. But what about this? Nuclear-powered Game Boys that can apparently run for a century.
Now, this is really misleading. So the technical part I'm going to leave to Ravi, because Ravi is our scientist, resident scientist.
I'm like Homer Simpson at the nuclear reactor.
So this guy has made a alleged nuclear-powered Game Boy, but it's not actually a Game Boy.
You mean it's clickbait titles?
It's clickbait.
In our show, Joe.
In our title, it got me.
It is cool, though. This is cool.
It is cool. So this guy, what's his name? Charnas?
Ian Charnas. Yeah, he's a YouTuber I hadn't come across before. He's this video. He's only got about 5,000 subs, but his channel's really good, actually. There's a lot of good stuff on there.
I'll have to check it out after this. But yeah, he's got it's the Tetris, like one of these cheap Tetris machine, like handhelds. I had one. I think I literally had the exact same one when I was a kid, but one of these knockoff Tetris handhelds, which use a hell of a lot less power than a Game Boy did, because they've got really dimly lit screens. Like, the screens are a lot dimmer than a Game Boy. I don't know how that's possible, but they are. And the processors and stuff like that in them take a lot less power to run. And I remember the one I had as a child, it ran off 4 AA batteries, but I don't think we ever replaced them, like ever, over the years. But it is nuclear powered. That part is true. And whether it lasts 100 years is debatable, because apparently you have to charge it for 2 months for it to work for an hour.
Okay, interesting.
But I guess the actual nuclear part of it lasts 100 years. But I'm going to leave that part for our resident scientist, Ravi, to try and explain.
Give us a lesson in nuclear physics, Ravi.
So basically, it's not the radium, which they used to use in World War II. And they used to paint it on the dials, when you were flying, and it was really bad. And, it would give you cancer. and
Yeah.
all of that kind of stuff. That he hasn't got that going. He's got something called,
is it Titrium?
Titrium. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
But
It's a tritium. I think.
Yeah.
tritium, and it kind of works with phosphorus as well, and phosphorus is like that light producing thing. So this works with phosphorus, and then there's a small array of solar cells. So actually, it's kind of like the nuclear is powering the solar cells. So it's kind of like solar paneled from the light that's produced from this
it
reaction.
produces the light.
Yeah.
So
It's interesting, a different way of kind of doing stuff, but it's not like he's kind of hooked up or he's built a nuclear reactor.
I was going to say it's not quite as nuclear reactor as all the articles are trying to make out.
No, I do remember there was David Han, who was a kid who was known as the radioactive Boy Scout or the nuclear Boy Scout, and years ago he basically created a nuclear reactor in his garden.
Nice.
And yeah, he got shut down by the authorities, and he was dismantling smoke detectors, radium from clocks and stuff.
Oh, wow.
And I think he ended up actually getting investigated by the FBI and stuff, because you can't really do that kind of thing.
I bet his explanation was, I was just trying to power my Game Boy. I didn't have any batteries.
That was it.
Yeah, so very cool. Definitely a novel way to power a handheld. I don't think I put that thing on my lap, though, if I'm honest. But if you want to check out the video.
No, but I like how he's got like, radioactive hydrogen put on the back, and he's put the like nuclear signs, and he's obviously made it look really nuclear and scary.
It's a really fun video as well. His production values and that are great. A lot of kind of comedy in his videos. So I'll link up his channel and the article in our show notes at theretrohour.com. Now, if we're talking about, really old school retro games, maybe going back to the early 80s, we all like to think that games that we've played thousands of times over the years, we kind of know them a bit like the back of our hands, and there can't be many secrets left to discover. But actually, it turns out an Easter egg that is kind of well known, but this has been all over the last couple of weeks, from a game by Jordan Mechner. Now, obviously, he was more well known for Prince of Persia, and we've had him on the show before, and he was talking to us about an earlier game, Karateka. Now, this was kind of a side-scrolling karate game, and it turns out a secret's been discovered in here.
Yeah, it was kind of rotoscoped as well, wasn't it? So it had like really, really nice graphics that he was kind of legendary for.
And when we had him on the show, he was talking about the fact that, that rotoscoping, it was the first time he did it, and he actually rotoscoped his brother, didn't he? Pictures of his brother doing karate. Yeah. And he's got like a really good book. He sent me a copy of it actually when we interviewed him, kind of like The Art of Prince of Persia, but there's a lot of kind of karateka stuff in there as well. And it was, a big hit on the Apple II, I believe it came out on originally, but then obviously later on it was released on the NES and the Game Boy as well. But it turns out that original Apple II version had a little Easter egg in there that was quite funny.
It's quite mad. So the 5.25 inch floppy, you'd basically turn it upside down and load it, and the game would load upside down. And you'd think like that's crazy. That's a deliberate trick, and it was. He kind of put the code in there as an Easter egg. And in this article on The Verge, they're talking about it, and a lot of people probably know about this already, but it surprised me when it came up. And Mechner says in it that he didn't think Broderbund would actually sign off on it because it required a change to the assembly line. So they had to change something in the assembly line just to make this work. But they did it and actually released it. And he says it was because the president of the company had a sense of humour. So he's really grateful for that. But that's mad, isn't it? Just turn the floppy disk upside down and the game's upside down. It's really cool, and there's a video of it on YouTube, flipping the disc. Yeah,
this game I've played it briefly, not to any extent that I discovered things like that, but I'm reading the comments here on the Verge article, and apparently there was another joke that kind of punishes you for how you finish the game. So at the end of it, apparently you approach an enemy there and you stop and you have to get ready. And then when you get to the princess, apparently if you don't run into the princess's arms, if you just kind of casually walk up, she'll actually hit you and kill you out of spite.
Like all real women.
Joe, I could imagine a cart one day, you finding one and putting it in the wrong way round, and then the game appearing upside down. Like, what have I done?
You know what? I'm not familiar with this game, and I opened the article, and before you guys started talking about it, then I was like, it's upside down in the picture straight away.
Even all these years later, people are still falling for it like you, Joe. 37 years later.
37 years.
So it is cool when we hear about new things that are found in classic games like that. Very cool. Now, what about this? I was reading this article here all about an incredibly rare Nintendo card that returns from dead and is up for sale. And this was for the Nintendo e-reader. Now, obviously today, if you're talking about e-readers, we generally think of, Kindles, stuff like that. But back in 2002, Nintendo, I don't think it actually came out over here, but it did in Japan and in North America. It was kind of an add-on for the Game Boy Advance that would read cards and kind of unlock content in games and give you extra stuff in there.
I guess this is like the precursor to the Amiibo, because the Amiibo is essentially like an e-reader, but with a figure, isn't it?
Yeah. You're pretty much spot on there. I'm not massively familiar with the e-readers, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Like pre-DLC kind of thing, but for Game Boy Advance games.
It's like a credit card that you'd slide. You'd slide it across.
Yeah, you swipe it through. I think you plug it into the cartridge slot of the Game Boy Advance and you swipe it or something like that. But yeah, this kind of dates all the way back to E3 2002, where Nintendo were promoting the e-reader and were handing out packs of cards, like e-reader cards, like to guests who walked in. And essentially there was prizes to be won in the cards. So the second prize, there was 100 cards hidden within these packs of cards for second prize. And then there was 10 first place ones. But to claim your prize, you had to hand your card in, which they'd then swipe on a Game Boy Advance, and it'd come up, and it was a Kirby card. And it'd come up with Kirby and say, congratulations, first prize, see the demonstrator for assistance for your E3 special edition prize. And obviously they would then keep the cards. So the idea is these 10 cards would be handed back in. But one has emerged on eBay this week, which is currently up for grabs for $1,400.
It's gone for more than that now. Yeah.
How much is it on now?
Nearly 10,000 now.
Yeah, nearly 10,000.
$999.
So it kind of comes back to what we've discussed over the last couple of weeks, and we'll discuss it on the Patreon hangout and stuff like that. It's like people are paying all this money for not even for games, for cardboard.
Yeah.
Essentially. So this isn't even a game. It's literally just you swipe the card and it just says, congratulations, you won. And
it's completely worthless now. You can't do anything with it.
Can't do anything with it. And, the guy hasn't even had it authenticated who's selling it on eBay. He's put it in like a little plastic clear case himself. Apparently it's not, been sent off to any of these authentication companies or anything like that, but he has uploaded a video to the eBay listing of him swiping it, proving it on his own Game Boy Advance with an e-reader and stuff like that to show that it is legit.
So I guess it's not like a swipe once and it doesn't work again kind of thing.
No, it's not like that. No, it's just, I'm assuming he probably went to E3 2002 and just kept the card and never handed it in.
Just didn't
found it in his coat
prize.
pocket.
That is smart if he did it deliberately, or he might have just been looking in the drawer and gone, "Oh, this might be worth something," and then checked it and gone, "Oh my
and chucked
God."
it on eBay. But he's...
some people in here are saying that the first prize was apparently golden Game Boy Advances, which might be worth even more than this now if it declared.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. Well, there you go. Well, apparently there's also one of the unopened packs of cards on eBay as well. So I don't know if it's the same seller, but they're selling the actual pack of cards sealed as well, which according to this article, which obviously said that the individual card was at 1,400, it's now at 10,000. That was apparently at 4,400 at that point. So that could be on more as well. But like I say, it seems to be coming off the back of Zelda NES selling for almost $1 million and stuff like that. It's people buying cardboard. I get it. I get, the rarity and the collectability of it and stuff, but it's just crazy when you really think about it.
It's anything Nintendo really, isn't it?
Yeah, it seems that way. Like Pokemon cards as well are so hot at the moment, like worth hundreds of thousands and tens of thousands of pounds and stuff. And it's Nintendo again, isn't it?
I think if you've learned any lesson from listening to our podcast over the last few years, it's never throw anything away.
Just keep all your junk. Keep
And all
it.
those
Especially
kids at
Nintendo
school
stuff.
that were playing Pokemon cards are now rich lords.
Oh, don't, because you know full well 99.9999% of all of us who had our Pokemon cards just ripped
Gave
them and
them away,
creased them
yeah.
and gave them
Yeah.
away and chucked them in the bin and stuff like that. It's horrible to think that, you know, between the three of us, we probably owned most of these things that we talk about at some point or another.
We weren't those smart kids at school who
No.
kept them, though, were
No,
we?
definitely
Unfortunately.
not. Far from it.
Yeah.
Only Matazos, only Matazos.
So this is really cool. I mean, we love talking about arcade units, and this is another one from Arcade 1UP that's now available for pre-order, and this is the X-Men arcade.
Yeah, we've been talking about Arcade 1UP quite a lot recently. And, you know, Ravi pointed it out the other week to us, not on the show, but he pointed out to us. He was just like, God, at the moment, there's just so many, like, classic arcade machines being re-released. And, you know, it is feeling that way a little bit at the moment, every single week, but they are cool. But yeah, this is the X-Men game, which, you know, was really, really popular in the 90s. The big, massive 4-player cabinet. I don't know if you guys ever played it.
Yeah, not a lot, but I have played it before. I'm familiar with it.
I played it in Skegness quite a bit when I was a kid. And you can still get it on like Xbox Live and stuff. And it is a good, you know, little beat 'em up. You know, it's a side-along beat 'em up, and it's based, interestingly, it's not based on the X-Men cartoon that came out in the 90s. It's based on the pilot episode of the X-Men show, which was meant to come out in the 80s but never got picked up. So the game kind of came out based on that TV show that never got picked up, which is an interesting story in itself. But this is coming in mid-October, so it's up for pre-order right now, and it just says delivery mid-October. But it's, once again, very similar to the Simpsons one that we reviewed the other week, that we spoke about the other week, sorry. You know, it's got the 4-player board on there, which is really, really cool. So, you know, you got your 4 sticks and everything like that.
It makes sense, that, doesn't it? Because they're already making the Simpsons one. I guess it can just kind of redesign it a bit.
Yeah, they can just kind of reskin it, can't they? And just put a different emulator in there and stuff like that. Doesn't just come with X-Men. It does come with the Avengers arcade game. And then also the Avengers Galactic Storm, which I'd never heard of, which is an arcade one-on-one fighter, which looks terrible.
Right.
It looks.
I thought you were going to say it looks so good. I can't wait to get it.
It looks like Rise of the Robots. Just give it a little YouTube, give it a little Google. It looks an awful one-on-one beat 'em up. So yeah, pretty cool that the X-Men games getting some love from Arcade 1UP, and I can see this one's selling well. You know, they've done a few odd ones, and you could argue this is a bit of an odd one. We're not as nostalgic for X-Men as we were the Simpsons one. We all got really excited about that, but I still think this is pretty cool. You know, if I saw this in the shop, I would still be there, like, you know, on my knees, you know, begging my wife, "Can I buy it, please?"
I think it's interesting to see them go for like superheroes and stuff, because that's got a cross compatible one. Like I think Batman would be a good one to do. I'm just looking. There's a
think
Pandora based kind of Batman one out there at the moment. Maybe they can start going through all the superheroes.
I don't think there was, off the top of my head, I can't think of any classic Batman arcade games. I know there's like a racing one from a few years ago, but other than actual home console games, I can't think of.
Have they done Terminator 2 yet? That would be good.
They haven't done, I don't think they've done any light gun ones yet, and I really want them to do some light gun ones. The Terminator 2 Judgment Day one would be really good.
I heard they did one with Sinden light guns.
Oh, did they? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I've not seen that, but no,
they are working on the technology. Joe, your dreams might.
My dreams may come true. But what's interesting about this one, and this could be in some of the other arcade 1UPs, but I've not seen this mentioned before. It does have online play. It has got Wi-Fi, so you can do online play on this one, which I've never seen as a feature whenever I've read the articles about the other ones. So I'm not too sure about that, but this one has
Big
has
Book
got
Hunter.
Wi-Fi.
That was.
Was it Big Book Hunter? Was it?
Yeah,
okay. Oh, okay. Hopefully they will do Terminator 2 arcade or Time Crisis or something like that.
You know what, though? Because you always talk about wanting to play light gun games, and finally, you've caved. He's picking up a CRT tomorrow, aren't you?
I'm picking up 2.
Right.
I'm picking up 2 tomorrow.
Not at the same time. You'll break your back, mate.
It's a friend of mine, one of my best friends, and he just messaged me the other day and was just like, I've you know, there's a story behind it which I won't go into, but he's acquired 2 CRT TVs. Do I want them? The condition is if I want them, I take both of them because he can't be asked to get rid of them.
Right.
So I was just like, yeah. So he's not sent me a picture of them. I don't know what brand they are or anything like that, or even how big they are. So there is that concern that there could be there could
Find
be
room for it. I know
Yeah.
Joe's gaming room is quite small as well. So
It's not that small.
no, but with all the nerd equipment for the radio show and stuff.
Yeah, that's
you're gonna have to.
Yeah, that is very true. But yeah, I'll put up a picture of the big silver, like early 2000s, like 50-inch ones or something.
Just playing House of the Dead, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm imagining your wife's face when you walk through the door with that tomorrow.
When I don't when I walk through the door and say to her, "Can you come to the car and help me lift these out?"
We're going to have to take the side of the house off to get it in.
Oh
The only way.
God, I think they will be little 14-inch ones. I'm sure he wouldn't do me in like that.
They're good ones as well, the small ones.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they are. They're the ones I've got as well. They're just, because I mean, when I was a kid, I used to play it on portable TVs anyway, so they kind of look right on, the 14-inch displays. But yeah, do keep us posted, Joe, and hope your back's all right for next week's show. Now, I think this time of year, we've all had our birthdays this year, haven't we? So this might not be very useful, but if you wanted to make anyone a birthday banner, do you remember doing these on dot matrix printers back in the day? Printing out these big banners that you put right across the room, happy birthday, any occasion really. Actually, Ravi just sent me a Valentine's card using this application. This is one of the most popular desktop publishing apps of the 80s, the Print Shop that you might have used on the Commodore 64 or the Apple II. By Broderbund, actually, you can now use this in your web browser.
Yeah, this is really cool actually because, lots of people had office suites and stuff like that, but they're a nightmare to do design on. And back then, it was really, really bad to do design on stuff. Do you remember using word processors and using the different colours to highlight stuff? So bold would be like one colour. Italics would be another. Oh God! And you'd have to visualize it all in your head and then print it off and be like, no, that's wrong.
Before WYSIWYG.
Before WYSIWYG, yeah. Well, this print shop is quite WYSIWYG, and it's actually built. Oh God! I've just started it up and it's made a massive noise. It is built into the browser.
Your dot matrix printers just sprung to life.
Yeah, and the best thing about it is you can actually, when you press print on this, it does a PDF, so you can get the PDF that you've created of this print shop in the browser, and you can actually get a PDF output and then print it on your modern printer, or if you want to go old school like Dan dot matrix. But I know Dan would probably use the original setup and go proper old school on it.
I love about it though, the actual PDF it gives you looks like a dot matrix, doesn't it? It's like, you print it out and it will look like it's come off a dot matrix printer.
Oh yeah, totally. Like the graphics are still the old school ones, and you've got greetings cards. You could do signs. We could do a retro hour letterhead, banners as well. Those banners where you do lots of different pages. And
did you guys ever make Christmas cards and stuff on your computers when you were kids?
No, I always just made them out of just paper and
crayons.
Yeah. This is when I was 15 as well.
I did magazines, so we had loads of scanners, and I'd do magazine covers, and I'd scan my face, and then do use printers and stuff and photocopiers and make a kind of magazine cover of my face plus stuck up against some glass. Ravi magazine.
Yeah, you can sell it on eBay. It's a really rare magazine now. Get any copies of that.
One issue.
Yeah. But I do remember, when we used to use BBC Micros, and we had, do you remember Star LC10 printers? They were 9-pin dot matrix printers. I think came out in about 89, 90. But we used them at school. And so I remember we had some sweeter software in the way we could make Christmas cards. And then for every birthday, Mother's Day, my mum's birthday, Christmas, I'd make them for all the family on these dot matrix printers at school. You were pro.
Do you remember the carbon copy paper as well that would
yeah
go in there, and then you'd also do drawings on the carbon copy because it'd be you can get a copy of your drawing.
I just remember that. I always remember giving one to my grandma at Christmas, and they're just looking at it what the hell is this? I remember the look on her face.
It's the future, Gran.
Isn't it cool? Yeah. Great. So if you do want to relive those days, you can do it all over again in your web browser. Now, we did have our patrons hangout on Sunday night, another Absolutely amazing one. And like we said, there's a bit of a heat wave in lots of the world right now, so we're all a little bit sweaty doing it, but it was well worth it. Actually, it was just nice to get out the sunshine on Sunday night, geek out about retro games. A few new faces who joined us for the first time as well. That was
I
lovely
love
to see.
seeing the new collections. Like, that's one of the highlights to me, is actually seeing people's collections. And we saw 2 absolutely amazing collections. People just going through all their machines and set up, and everybody's sitting there drooling.
We always do that, don't we? If someone new comes on, we're like, all right, okay, your initiation is show us your retro gaming setup.
I did actually point out on it that we always say on the show, if you just want to come and watch, you don't have to talk and get involved. You can just come and watch. As soon as people join, we're like, you're on mute. You're on mute. Right. Let's see your collection,
because there was a few people who just came in and watched, and keep your camera off, and that's fine. If you're a bit shy, we don't mind.
It's fine. But we do usually do that when we can see somebody's talking.
Trying to talk, because it mutes them automatically, and that's. I'm sure that's like a new thing since COVID. It's the new etiquette. People doing Zooms. You're on mute. You're on mute. There should be a universal sign for you're on mute.
Yeah, we did talk about all kinds of what we're chatting about this week. Then there was a lot of new topics.
To be fair, we mainly went through the game collections because they were amazing and they were huge. And then what else were we talking about?
Talking about movies, of course. Always talking about movies. Video game documentaries as well. We were talking about. Yeah. Really good stuff.
So we do these once a month, and it would be amazing to see you there as well. Not only did we do a Patrons Hangout this weekend, we released the latest episode of our Patrons exclusive podcast, the Retro Hour After Hours, that this time was all about the Super Nintendo.
Amazingly, I had some stuff to chat about, which I thought I wouldn't with the SNES. Really good episode that was. Yeah,
no, I was quite impressed with Ravi, actually, considering, the kind of run up to it, the prep for it, what little prep we do for the after hours. Ravi was really
hours worth.
Yeah, hours, days and days worth. But yeah, Ravi, you were quite nervous, weren't you, about
because it's a machine that I never owned.
But it was really cool to find out, talk about all our memories of the machine, and also learn that none of us, even though we all kind of hold the SNES in quite high regard. For me, it's either my favourite console of all time or second favourite. Still, the jury's out on that one. None of us actually owned one until we were adults.
Yeah.
Well, Ravi still doesn't own one.
I am, yeah.
He will soon. I've got a spare one he can have.
Yeah. Oh, looking forward to it.
But yeah, it is, because I think this is the first kind of system episode that we've done where none of us actually owned it as kids.
Yeah, we were all familiar with it. We all played it. We all borrowed them, rented them, and stuff like that. But yeah, we did our top 5 games on them, but that ended up actually only being about the last 15 minutes of the hour and a half episode, because we were just talking about memories in the machine, weren't we?
Yeah.
God, we could have gone on for hours. It was so much fun.
And I always dig up the news clips, and we look at articles from the time.
and the accessories as well.
Yeah.
So we've done a few of these now. We did the Mega Drive one. We've done already as well. We've done which other consoles have we done already?
I think that's it.
The second one.
Okay.
Well, there's lots more to do.
There's a lot more to do.
PlayStation next. It's
PlayStation next.
I got to be there you go. That's decided. And also we do the retro years as well, where we focus an hour and a half, 2 hours, all about a particular year in gaming and technology, and dig out all the big games of that year and chat about them as well. We're going to do 2002 as our next episode as we work up the retro years. So if you want to check out our Patrons exclusive podcast, that is one of the perks of being a supporter of this show. You also get the regular podcast early most weeks. You get it ad free as well. But really, you're doing this just to support the Retro Hour and to make sure that we can keep bringing out new episodes every single Friday. And for doing so, for backing us on Patreon, you will get a mention in the most prestigious high score table in the world of retro gaming, the Retro Hour Hall of Fame. Like this week, a big thank you to Jeff Owen from Beyond Farpoint Podcast,
John Butler,
Stephen Marshall,
Analog Darling,
and M_Duck.
See, I didn't know if that was a Nottingham thing. Maduck.
Maduck, maybe.
Maybe it could be.
Which is a slang from people who live outside Nottingham. Like, what? People do actually call each other duck.
Yeah, we're duck. Yeah. And in Yorkshire, it's flower and petal. So, yeah, loads of weird slang in the UK.
So, big thank you for everyone who's backed us on Patreon, and we'll see you at the next Hangout, hopefully, as well. Right now, let's do our Retro Gaming Shop of the Week before we get into our interview with Richard Spitalny. This is something we do each week. We want to give some love and big up all of these independent retro gaming stores that exist all around the world. You know, these places that you go maybe on a Saturday afternoon, they've got people there who love gaming, they do good prices on retro games as well. We want to keep these shops alive, and every week we're giving big mentions to retro gaming stores all around the world. It's actually really cool because I know over the last 2 months that we've been doing this, we regularly get people tweeting us saying, oh, I didn't realize this shop was there, I've gone to visit it, then, tagging them on Twitter and everything as well. So it is cool that people are finding out about new shops near where they live through us doing this.
Yeah, totally. And, you guys contact us and let us know about more stores, because it's really important to have these stores going. Record shops are actually had a revival and come back, and we'd love retro gaming shops to start exploding again. People taking their kids there and stuff, and the kids having the experience of being surrounded by games. It's like kind of in Home Alone or something like that. And this week is called Insanity Gaming Arcade, and also Insanity Retro Gaming. We got a message from Nick Leonard, and he said, "Hey retro friends, I just wanted to share this little gem. I haven't been to this arcade yet, only the shop time and time again, but it looks amazing." So this is in Nuffield Industrial Estate in Poole, which is in Dorset. And this place, it's an arcade, but also a retro store. And the retro store alone looks absolutely insane. I hope you guys are seeing the images of this at the moment.
This is actually the first one that I already actually follow on Facebook.
Oh, nice.
So I was like, I recognise this. And then when you said the name of it, I was like, oh yeah, I already follow that one, because of when we started doing this, I started looking for shops that I could potentially drive to at weekends to go retro game hunting.
That's the only reason we do this. It's just to find places for Joe.
Yeah, it's just for me to find places. Unfortunately, it's a little bit far away for me. But if I'm ever in the area, I'll definitely jump in, because it does look amazing. And then
I've got an auntie who lives in Bournemouth. You can go stay with her.
I will go stay with her. I'll go see. I'm Dan's mate. Just knocking on her door. But the arcade section looks awesome. It looks like a big warehouse just full of arcade machines. They've got like Time Crisis 3. They've got that big Star Wars one with the big screen, where the seat moves and everything like that.
Oh, Battle Pod.
Yeah. That's it.
And
then they've got a load of retro ones as well. Crazy Taxi, yeah, just spotted that one. This doesn't look like it's just been thrown together. Like, this is a labour of love.
The design of it too, it's got that kind. It reminds me of arcades in the 90s. Very kind of industrial looking,
with that low dark ceiling.
Yeah,
he's nailed it there.
Iron rafters everywhere and like neon lighting and stuff. It looks very cool.
It's got that Laser Quest aesthetic, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And the shop looks amazing. Like they've got a really nice layout. They've got a lot of box stuff there. All the systems are kind of laid out, and I love the use of using. This is what I've always recommended: nail polish display cases to display Game Gear games and Game Boy games, because they all just fit in there perfectly. And it just looks really good. Like, I could spend an awful lot of money here.
What a great idea as well, having an arcade and a retro gaming shop connected, because whenever I go to like Arcade Club and that, often you play the games and you think, oh, I wouldn't mind a copy of this, for my Mega Drive or something.
You're giving them ideas there, Dan.
Yeah. So if you want to visit them, Insanity Retro Gaming in Poole and Insanity Gaming Arcade, I'll link them up in our show notes. Right then, let's get the story of legendary games like Spy vs. Spy, Boulder Dash as well, First Star Software, with our special guest next on the Retro Hour podcast, Richard Spitalny. You're listening to the Retro Hour podcast, and it is time for our favourite part of the show, when we welcome on our very special guest. And we're so excited to welcome on our guest this week, who's worked with some incredible franchises and companies over the years, including, of course, the man behind Spy vs. Spy, that we need to talk about in great detail very soon. But let's welcome onto the Retro Hour podcast the amazing Richard Spitalny. Hello, Richard.
Hey there. Hi, Dan. Hi, Ravi.
Great to have you joining us. Now,
Thank you.
Before we get into, your stories of these amazing games that you've worked on, I mean, the way we like to work things is we like to go back to day one and kind of find out your, geek credentials. What was the first thing that kind of got you into video games? Where did it all start for you? Do you remember?
Yes, I do. And I came to video games through movies, feature films. I was working with Billy Blake, who was the co-owner of Millimeter Magazine, which was a trade journal for production and post-production, mostly post-production for television and film. And through an agent at the William Morris Agency, actually, I was introduced to Robert Averick, who was then their editor. But Robert had written the screenplay for The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia, which was a big song here back then in the early 80s, late 79, early 80s. They had produced The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia for AFCO Embassy Pictures, and we decided that we would try to produce some films ourselves. I was working with Robert on an original screenplay, which was Blood Bride, which he wrote. And I was also working with Billy on trying to option the rights to Tie a Yellow Ribbon, around the old oak tree, and also Rhinestone Cowboy.
Right.
And while we were working on that as independent film producers on the East Coast, Billy invested in a computer store, retail store. And the person who was managing that store was Fernando Herrera. And Fernando's son, Stevie, had been born basically blind with multiple cataracts. And after he had his first series of operations when he was around 2, Fernando used his Atari 400 computer to kind of try to simulate the eye chart, where you have the letter E in different orientations, and they have different lines, and it's bigger and smaller. He replicated that on the computer, and he found that his son, who wasn't even really speaking yet, but by moving his hand to show his 3 fingers sticking out, if you can picture that with your thumb grasping your pinky, making the letter E. Indeed, Stevie was seeing well, and Fernando used the computer to display the alphabet, and for each of the letters he would draw a little picture, and he would show it in uppercase and lowercase. And at about that time, Atari was holding competition for amateurs, and Fernando submitted what he was calling My First Alphabet to Atari. And there were different categories. There was entertainment, there was education, there was productivity, and he won the best educational program. And then he ended up winning the best overall of all the programs. And he was awarded the first Star of Merit. And that, well, actually, it was called the Star Award, and it was the first one ever given. And there was a $25,000 prize. And they started featuring Fernando in 2-page full-color magazine spreads. And Billy and I said, well, wait a minute, why don't we try to build a company around Fernando? It's very difficult trying to produce features unless you're in Hollywood, and even then the odds are greatly against you. And that's what we did. We, in summer of 1982, we formed First Star Software. We named it after that Star Award.
That's really interesting, because you say that you were in the film industry as well. So
yeah,
you produced Rhinestone as well with Dolly Parton and Sylvester Stallone. Yeah. Do you have any good stories of those folks?
Oh, I sure do. But since this is sort of public, put it mildly, yes. So as I mentioned, The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia was done at AFCO Embassy Pictures. We had optioned the rights to Tie a Yellow Ribbon, and we had optioned the rights to the song Rhinestone Cowboy. And we were looking for writers to write the screenplay. And there was a writer, totally unknown at that point, Phil Alden Robinson. And he had a screenplay which had not been produced. It was a police action detective kind of movie. And we read it, and we just thought this guy was amazing. Even though it was dark and, violent and action, there was humor in it too. So we retained Phil to write the screenplay for Rhinestone. And we got Michael Keaton and Sissy Spacek. We had them all set to go, and Dolly Parton's agent, Sandy Gallen, got a hold of the screenplay, and he said he wanted Dolly to do it. So whereas we had a $7 million budget and a great screenplay ready to go, we were going to try to do it at AFCO Embassy, as I say, with Michael Keaton and Sissy Spacek. Suddenly, this turned into a huge production because Sandy wanted Dolly to do it, and then the Hollywood thing starts to happen, where you try to package the talent to give you the broadest commercial appeal. So where there was a concern that Dolly wasn't a big enough draw in the large cities and internationally, somehow they had the great idea, well, why don't we get Sylvester Stallone? He would round out that appeal. Well, the problem with that is the story was about a country western singer. Sly can't sing and can hardly act, really, in my opinion.
He was an action guy, wasn't he?
Yeah, he's an action guy. I didn't mean it quite the way that sounded. So it was greenlit. It started to go forward, and actually, although I'm a little ahead of myself, but it all ties together. I couldn't be on set and line produce it, so to speak, because in 1983, which we haven't gotten to yet, we sold half the company to Warner, and I was put under an exclusive contract, so I couldn't leave. But yeah, that's a little bit of the movie background.
Well, it's kind of interesting coming from like movie production, then going into video games and seeing that link that early. You mentioned the Atari Program Exchange as well, and there was a lot of innovative kind of companies on there. Did winning it really help cement the reputation and kind of help First Star have that huge leap at the beginning?
Yes, no question about it. Fernando, who, as I mentioned, had been managing the computer store and had written the program My First Alphabet for Stevie, he had been making games on his own before that. And he was very tight with the engineers at Atari. Back then, you know, I don't know how he had the number, but you could call up Atari directly and speak to the engineers. And he had a very, very, very early serial number, I remember, on his computer. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was, somewhere around 100. So he was reverse engineering the hardware. He actually showed Atari how to make 256 colors instead of the 128 colors they had been advertising. And this game that he had done, Space Chase, which had quite a little following, we believe is the first game ever to have wraparound, where you would, if your character, your sprite moved off to the right side of the screen, it magically would appear on the left side of the screen. So he was, even though like Pac-Man and others obviously were soon to do it, that was the first program we believe that did that. So having on his first game for the company, which was Astro Chase, we had right on the box the Atari logo, winner of the first Atari Star award. Yeah, it was having Fernando's name and image, appearing in, I think it was Life magazine. I can picture the full page color spreads. I can't swear that it was Life, but it was magazines of that stature. So that was very helpful.
I mean, personally, were you looking into programming and at least understanding kind of the concepts of games and the way they worked at that time?
No. I never, I'm very poor at math, number one. I know my own limitations. But I have never thrown a line of code. Over the years, I have acquired a certain kind of understanding of how code works. But I actually think not being a programmer and not knowing what is considered doable or not doable has served me well in working with programmers and engineers creatively, because I'll put out an idea without the programming knowledge filter stopping me from, how could I do that? Well, I'm not even going to mention it. It can't be done. So in talking with Mike Riddell on Spy versus Spy, for example, that's why I said, well, can't we just split the screen and have both players be playing simultaneously? That was very important to me, because I always envisioned the Spy versus Spy comic being translated interactively in a way that would not be turn-based. And therefore the question to Mike and him turning around saying, I'll give it a try. So, but no, never got into programming.
So it kind of didn't limit your mind, really. You would approach stuff without that kind of programming.
Exactly. Exactly. I think that would have been an example of where, a little knowledge is dangerous. I had no knowledge. And I think that also in working with programmers, they kind of liked the idea that we could have that kind of an exchange. And then if they could do it, it was like magic to me. And I would become very, effusive and really very complimentary and get very excited. And that kind of fuels the creative process. I mean, Fernando constantly amazed me, and Mike Riddell certainly constantly amazed me. And whether it was rightfully amazement or not, I don't know. But I think what they did was kind of magical.
So how did the Parker Brothers and Radio Shack partnership come about, and how much did that help the company grow?
Oh, wow. It helped us tremendously. We started the company with $50,000. We basically said to Fernando, what do you want to do? He was working from his home. We were buying the equipment, and he would give us updates, every now and then. But it was his game, his concept. We just said, you do what you want. Our job is, to produce it and then figure out how to distribute it and to publish it. Let me just say, but before the Parker Brothers deal, there was almost another deal. We started in the summer of 1982. Astro Chase shipped December 7th of 1982. Somewhere in between that, probably late November, we had a meeting with Steven Greenberg, who was the largest shareholder at Commodore Computers at the time, a very eccentric person, kind of looked like Benjamin Franklin with this long, flowing gray hair. He had a company on the top of Rockefeller Plaza, 30 Rock, a company called Animetrics. And Billy had an uncle who was a press agent for Broadway. And Stephen had invested in a play recently, and we had an introduction, and he knew we had this game that had not yet been completed and wasn't yet out in the market, and it was for the market that he was interested in. There wasn't a C64 version. Maybe he'd be interested because Fernando was working on the Atari. And we come up into, I've never seen offices this big. It was the entire floor. And as we're walking to his office, he is showing us, as we go down this hallway, room after room after room with programmers, all, in each in their own office with Commodore stations all set up. And we had brought our Atari because they didn't have any there. We brought the hardware, set it up, showed him the game, and he was very, very interested. And then we went into his office. Huge floor-to-ceiling windows, all blocked off. He kept his drapes closed. His office was up like on a mini stage. It was about 10 feet off the ground where his desk was. And all these monitors, stock exchange monitors all around him. and Billy and I are in chairs on the regular floor. So, we're looking up at him, and he says, I like it. I think there's some potential, and I'll give you $25,000, and we'll figure out a royalty. And, oh, wow. I mean, we had just put in 50,000 and we already had an offer for 25,000, and we were very interested. But we said, well, thank you. We have a partner who, Fernando, who actually did the programming and all the graphics and all the sound, all the music. And we have to run it by him. He said, no. You take my offer today or it's nothing. In fact, if you call me tomorrow, I won't even take your call.
Wow.
And it was very chilling, and, but there was just no way we were going to do that without discussing it with Fernando. And so we respectfully declined. And as we were walking, Atari 800 in hand and almost getting on the elevators, he says, okay, $250,000, but not a penny more, and you have to let me know now.
No way.
So, oh, okay. Now that we know Fernando is going to be okay with. So we said, that sounds good. And then, okay, but I want to make the same deal, first right of refusal on your next 4 titles. We said, okay, subject to, working this all out, that sounds like something we could live with. And we're going to go back and we'll tell Fernando and we'll follow up. Anyhow, to make a long story short, we never were able to come to terms. We went to contract. We did a lot of work back and forth on it, but it wasn't happening. And we released the game, as I say, in December 7th. And mostly I was still working on the film projects with Billy. Fernando was at home working on Astro Chase. In the building where we had our offices, there was someone who was in the electronics business. I don't even know what it was. Small little widgets, little connectors, switches. And he said, well, I'm going to the Consumer Electronics Show. I have a 10-foot table. I'm not in the hall. I'm outside the hall. But, I'll be happy to let you use half the table. So I said, let's do it. And through the Consumer Electronics Show itself, rented a large, I guess they call it rear screen projection TV. We had shipped the title, so we had packaging. I had written the documentation. My father was in the printing business. They printed it up. I had taken screenshots of Astro Chase, the original animation, the beautiful Earth in the center with all of the planets around it. And I had these 8x10 color pictures in a portfolio, and went out. I had no appointments. We did print up cards, and people who were taking the escalators up and down to different floors of the convention center were like breaking their neck. You could see them going up the escalator and then turning it and then, they would disappear as they glided up but the whole way up, they were all looking at what were they seeing? So my problem, the challenge was, how do I get the people who I need to see this? Because the only way I could really show it, I thought, it was, I certainly wasn't going to go in and commandeer someone's computer on the show floor. So I went to all of the big, publishers. You get a brochure at each show. You see the floor plan and you can see who's there. And I tracked down the big companies. And while the person who was, very high up at Parker Brothers was standing, having a meeting on the floor, not in one of the meeting rooms, was talking, I kind of nudged my way, got into his view, and I opened up this portfolio with these screenshots. And in the middle of mid-sentence to whoever he was talking to, he said, "Excuse me." And he said, "What's that?" And I said, "Well, that's our new game." He said, "What's it on?" I said, it's on the Atari." He said, "That looks fantastic." I said, "If you'd like to, we can make an appointment. Come by. I'll show it to you. You can play it. We are right. And I gave him the location, and he had somebody at the front desk, tell him his schedule, and he said, I'll come by at whatever, and he did, along with others too. By the way, I did the same thing with several publishers, but they were blown away, and so that was January, and we ended up signing with them very early in April for $250,000.
Well, it was an absolutely kind of stunning game, like especially for the Atari 800. The quality of it and the scrolling and the intro and everything. Did you think your kind of movie background help you promote that and kind of aim for that look?
Yeah, I do. I don't mean to take much credit at all. Fernando was amazing, but the having that theatrical opening and spreading it out so that as you advanced and got, if you were able to work your way up into higher and higher levels, that you would see more and more of the story. That was the kind of thing where I think my film background and creative conversations with Fernando, that was helpful. And licensing also, I must say, I had a lot of licensing background because that in the movie business, there's a lot of slicing and dicing between, domestic box office and international rights and television and ancillary. And so that all came very naturally to me. And early on with First Star Software, we ended up doing a great deal of licensing for, systems that we didn't want to bother, or territories and languages and formats that we otherwise wouldn't have handled. And that was a tremendous source of revenue for us, and also why I think we were so attractive to Warner Software, which purchased half the company in November of 1983, because, that's all bottom line dollars. If you turn over source code or you just turn over a ROM or what have you, and boom, you're getting advances against royalties, and you're getting ongoing royalties from MSX or, NEC or, whatever. It was great. So definitely my licensing background was very, I think, served us well.
Well, of course, a massive hit for First Star was Balderdash, one of the most infamous arcade games of all time, and on every home platform back in the 80s, I remember. What's kind of the background there then, and how did you first get in touch with Peter Leeper? And when you saw that game, did you know that it was going to be a hit then? Did you have like an instinct about it?
So, without sounding immodest, I did. My gut was that it was amazing. That's easy to say now, but that truly was my reaction. When we were publishing early on, with Astro Chase being the first title, we packed in each box a solicitation. It was a postcard. Do you have a game? Do you have a program? We're always looking. And we gave the phone number and our address, and please submit it. So Peter submitted Balderdash to us before it was completed, to us and to, I think, every other publisher out there. But he was up in Canada, the eastern portion of Canada, and we were in New York, so we were not that far away. And I have since learned from him that was something that he liked. He was hopeful that he would be doing business with someone who was, geographically closer. And I just happened to be the person to open up the submission. I was the first to play it at the company, and I thought it was amazing. And then I showed it to Billy, and again, the company at that point, what made us a software company was Fernando working out of his house, and in our offices, our film offices, where it was me and Billy, and we had a publicist, full-time publicist, Diana Loomis, and for the movies. She quickly became our publicist, PR person for First Star Software. We had an LE system. It was a series of hard drives where we would basically put bad sectors as we duplicated the disks, because we were doing all of our own publishing early on. We were fulfilling the orders right from our offices. I thought it was amazing. I was a little put off by the fact that the color palette for every level was the same, but we all were enjoying it right away. And then coincidentally, we had an appointment with Arnie Katz and Bill Kunkel, who were coming by on something related to Astro Chase. I said, "Hey guys, what do you think of this?" They said, "It's so playable. It's amazing. It's great." So that, it was unanimous, and we ended up acquiring the intellectual property from Peter as a result of all of us thinking it was going to be amazing.
But it was one of the games that, even my mother would sit down and play it with me. She'd find it addictive, even though she's not a gamer in the slightest. It had that appeal, I think. Yeah,
yes.
that crossover appeal.
Yeah. It sounds like hyperbole, but in every promotion we ever did, in every interview, in every magazine article, whatever it is, throughout its legacy, that is one of the qualities of the game that most people notice right away. It appeals to hardcore, casual, first-time players, boys, girls, men, women. It really does have a universal appeal. And again, it's cliche nowadays, but it was something that we were always looking for. It's very easy to learn, but very difficult to master.
Our UK friends were really happy with the Spectrum. Getting a version of it. How did you guys kind of do that deal? And did you get sent a Spectrum then, or were they around?
Spectrum was so we were working with Barry Friedman and Jan Putnam and Tracy Coates. In fact, ICG, International Computer Group, who are our agents, not on an exclusive basis. I was the only client, I believe, that they ever had who retained the right to do their own licensing, but I have that licensing background. But with Barry and Jan, and again, they had already made Miner 2049er a huge hit. The game itself was obviously incredible, but they had proven their ability to get the game on every platform out there. And so Spectrum, I'm positive, I'm sure, must have come through a deal that Barry worked out for us in Europe.
Did you have to approve all the ports?
Yes. Oh, yeah. No. All of I approved all of the ports up until very recently. That was true. Every Boulder Dash game up until the one that has just come out, Boulder Dash Deluxe, only was released after intensive game testing by me and my approval. For good or ill. There are some versions more recent over the years where some of our most adamant fans feel that we strayed from the Holy Grail. I tried not to. I pretty much stand by all of the versions.
Well, another big license that you had was Superman. Getting the game license out of that must have been absolutely huge.
It wasn't as difficult as it would otherwise have been, since at the time we did that and Spy vs. Spy and Wonder Woman, we were a sister company. So we did that after Warner Software, which was a division of Warner Publishing, a Warner Communications company, which is how they always describe themselves. Once they were equity partners, the first thing we did is we took a weekend at one of their executive suites, or apartments as they called them. Warner has some apartments that they maintain, or they did back then, in Manhattan for executives who are coming in from the West Coast or internationally or what have you. And so Albert Latuca, who used to be the head of Macmillan and had become the president of Warner Software, who was the person I had negotiated our deal with and was working with, he said, "Look, let's spend a weekend and let's try to come up with what it is that makes First Star First Star. What's special and unique about you and your approach, and let's see if where we have synergies." And it was during those sessions where I identified Spy versus Spy and Superman and Wonder Woman as the properties under the Warner umbrella that I thought would make great games, interactive experiences. And as a sister company, we negotiated all of these deals at arm's length, but under very favorable terms. So yeah, I don't think a relatively young, very young, unproven company would have had a shot if it hadn't been for the fact that we were, a sister company.
And like spies were really popular back then, like especially kind of fun comedy spies like Clouseau and the kind of comic Dick Tracy and stuff like that.
Yes.
Do you think that really hit with the public when it came out?
I think that probably contributed to it. The fact that we were in a sweet spot, kind of again culturally, where those sorts of characters did have a very broad appeal, and there were TV shows and all of movies and what have you. But the Spy versus Spy characters, I think, are kind of unique, were then and to this day. But it helped for sure.
It always reminded me a bit because I remember, I loved Inspector Gadget on TV around that time.
Right.
Very kind of tongue-in-cheek and humorous, not serious.
Yes. No. The humor is a big part of it. The gadgetry, the traps, all of that was very helpful. We didn't have to invent the genre, so to speak. It was across, many entertainment channels, as I say, whether it be the movies or the TV show, Get Smart, or, all of that. But the characters themselves were this interesting combination of slapstick and strategy and the surprise ending. And that was the appeal to me.
How did the character design develop then?
For the game with Mike, I was, as I had mentioned earlier, I was dead set on not being turn-based. It was very important to me that we retain the surprise ending that you have in the comic strips. And if you are alternating turns, there's too much time to think and to watch and to see. I think it would have slowed things up and totally eliminated the ability to have that surprise ending. So by having what I ended up calling simulvision, the split screen, and simulplay, the ability to both players to be active at the same time, along with the trapulator, which were all trademarks I created, we had something where action continually flowed, and you could change the game literally in the last second, because your opponent could have everything needed in the briefcase, be on their way to the exit, and you could ambush them, win, in hand-to-hand combat, so to speak, and then reclaim the briefcase and win. So that was my, answer or solution to retaining the surprise ending.
Was there ever any concern that because obviously it was quite a complex title compared to a lot of games on 8-bit machines back then? Did you ever think that would put users off? Was there ever a concern that it was a bit too complex for gamers?
Yes, there was. We addressed it in two ways. The map, so the ability at any time to see where you and the opponent was we hoped would be part of the solution. And also, I asked Mike to add what I referred to as breadcrumbs, like in Hansel and Gretel, where they, would drop pieces of bread so that they could find their way home. Hopefully, you know that fairy tale. I don't know if it's
Yeah.
okay. So we had, I asked Mike to display at the bottom of each player's screen, their half of the screen, little arrows, up, down, left, right. And if you followed them in reverse order, if you started with the most recent icon, which would be furthest to the right, if you did whatever it said, so if it, pointed right, if you left the room you were in and went to the right, you were back in the room you were right before. And then if you did down, then you went to the door at the front of the screen, and you went into the room that were 2 moves back. So the combination of the map and the breadcrumbs was definitely, those were implemented because we were concerned that this was unlike anything else. It might be too difficult.
You were interestingly also involved in some Star Trek titles, taking you back to your kind of film days with the FMV video stuff on the PC. Star Trek Borg. What was it like working on that kind of interactive movie?
Interesting. So Imergy is a company that I worked at. Started First Star in 1982. Sold it to BBG Entertainment really in 2018. The only period in there where I was not exclusively working for First Star was a couple of years. I think it was like 98, 99. I honestly forget, where I was the executive vice president at a company called Imergy. And we did intranets, and we did a lot of CD-ROM educational titles. We also worked with Simon & Schuster on the Star Trek properties. We also did an interactive The Joy of Cooking, which was a Simon & Schuster property, which is actually kind of cool. You could tell the program what was in your refrigerator, and our database would generate recipes with things that you already had in your pantry and refrigerator. This is way back when.
Sounds useful nowadays.
Yeah, it was really cool. But but I did work overseeing the production of several Star Trek titles where they used QuickTime VR and the Omnipedia. And I was the one who actually I found the company Dragon Speech, I think it was, and made that deal with them. And we integrated speech recognition into those products. And again, this is well before Alexa or anything like that. And it was really cool. You could kind of mimic that interaction that we saw all those years on the bridge, in TV, where you would computer, and then you would speak. But I was producing the producers there as the executive vice president in charge of production. So it was actually Peter Mackey who was the true genius and head of production behind all of the Star Trek titles that we did.
Did you have some fact checkers there, because Star Trek fans? Yeah.
Well, yes, but interestingly, Peter is a universal Star Trek fact checker. He's one of those Trekkies who literally knows it all. But Simon & Schuster and the Okudas or Okada, the people who designed the interface, that beautiful kind of lavender, blue, purpley, touchscreen interface, they reviewed everything to the nth degree. So they had very stringent controls, quality controls, and fact checking, which, by the way, was very true at EC Publications, Mad Magazine, and DC Comics for Superman. So I was used to working with licensors who were very protective of their IP.
Star Trek games, I always feel, have kind of struggled in comparison to Star Wars titles, and that's mainly because of LucasArts games and them having a lot of technology behind it. Did you guys feel that when you were producing it, and that there wasn't a kind kind of central Star Trek company?
I mean, it's interesting. What the work that I was involved with for the Star Trek franchise was not gaming. It was experiential. It was replicating being on the bridge and not terribly mission based or interactive. So there were almost, at least the titles that I was involved with, which was only a few. But I agree with you that Star Wars, that franchise in the gaming space, has ran rings around it.
It's interesting because the latest kind of Star Trek game, Bridge Crew, is like a complete VR experience where you're exactly sitting in the bridge and kind of doing that. So interesting to see it kind of come full circle.
When we did the QuickTime VR work, it was, I don't want to say categorically the first commercial product with it, but it may have been, or it was very, very, very early. We were working very closely, with Apple, and it was so we had to send, our crews out to the sets with special equipment, specialized cameras, and it was arduous taking everything back and then stitching it all together. But the experience, even back then, was, totally immersive and amazing.
We're actually now moving a bit more into kind of the last decade or so. I mean, Balderdash, a game that just won't go away. I mean, that game just keeps coming back and it's still a massive hit. And we've had stuff like, obviously, the 30th anniversary version, Balderdash Deluxe. Tell us about kind of bringing it back and kind of why you think the interest is continuously around that game then, and kind of what changes have been made to bring it into the 21st century.
Well, I think one of the reasons why it continued as long as it did was because I never gave up on it. I mean, the honest truth is that in keeping First Star around as long as I could, that was our strongest IP that we controlled. Spy versus Spy, we did not own the intellectual property, obviously. So the name and the likeness of the characters we did not own. We own the copyrights to the game designs and to our interface, Simulvision, Simulplay, the Trapulator, and what have you. But Boulder Dash was all ours. And it was a combination of being solicited, where we would be approached by companies that wanted to do, like I remember when we did the first mobile version, that came from Instantcom, a company over in Croatia. And they approached us. They wanted to take the license to try to bring it out on the Nokia handsets. And I said, I really don't want to do a license. We'll do it together. We'll contribute the rights. We'll work on the design together. You'll do the programming and all the porting and all of that. And I'll take care of getting it published. And we'll be 50-50 partners. And that's what we did. And we did that for several iterations on mobile with Instantcom. And then we did that on PC for Treasure Pleasure and Pirate's Quest, where we were approached by a company in Hungary. And same thing. I said, no, instead of doing a license, why don't we do it this way? And that became a very successful model for us.
And obviously Spy versus Spy, I mean, we've had, I know you said you don't own the rights to that game, but there was like, I remember the remake of the original game that was on the iPhone, probably about 7-8 years ago now. I mean, did you have obviously involvement with that being the original game then? What was kind of the story around getting that updated? And
yes. No, I was very involved with that to a great degree. Here's a case where we were approached by Robots and Pencils, and I explained to them, you will have to make a deal with First Star for the game designs and all of that. You'll have to make a separate deal with EC Publications for the intellectual property. I can middleman that for you and mediate that and make all the introductions and work with you, and I know what they look for, and we were able to all come to terms so that all the pieces of the puzzle were in place. And then I worked very closely with them because we realized that it was going to be very important to have included the original version, the retro version. And I was dead set on having that be, I want to say pixel for pixel. I don't know if that's the case, but we had to make some changes, obviously, because we were dealing with a touch interface. But the levels, the caves, the look and the feel, I worked, to answer your question, a great deal of time on that. And I know they became frustrated as time went by. This was all their investment, obviously, and you want to get to market as soon as you can so that you start generating revenue to start recouping your investment. But I must say, it was not it wasn't a strong resistance. They kind of believed all along that in the long run, if we could make this a really as true to the original as possible, it would work commercially and we would have a stronger title. And it was very, very well received, and it did exceptionally well. And I think we're all very glad that we put in the extra time to get it right.
And I think it is important as well when you've got a game that's that loved by its fan base as well. And it's people's memories as well, isn't it? So you get it wrong and you can get right. Really bad, can't it?
Well, by the way, it would be disingenuous if I didn't say I was also heavily influenced by some of the negative feedback I had received to some of the Boulder Dash titles, where we, introduced things like, bombs or the ability to kick, things which were not in the original. Again, as a designer, as a creator, as a producer, there are so many things, so many factors that you need to take into consideration. But one of them is always your target audience. If you're doing something in a series where you have a built-in fan base, that's a huge consideration. So I don't take it lightly. And as I say, I know some of the more recent Boulder Dashes did receive some complaints. Some people obviously love it. But for Spy vs. Spy, especially the first one, after so long, I was keen on having it be basically an identical port.
Yeah, and I think as well it must be quite rewarding, having it out on these new generation platforms. Because I always remember, before the pandemic, when we used to do video game events, we used to do talks and stuff there. Or it was always amazed me when you'd see like mums and dads coming in with their kids and showing them the arcade games that they used to play as kids, and the kids playing on them and getting into it. I mean, is it rewarding when a new generation of players is getting into these games on new platforms for you?
Yes, very much so. It's kind of like the Beatles. It's like when you play a Beatles song for your children or your grandchildren, and they love it. And it's seeing another generation, because there have been several now, come along and really take to it is very rewarding. And I have two daughters, and it was always important to me to have the games that I produced and published be non-violent. And that was partly why we did the Romper Room series, which was an educational TV show here, alphabet and numbers. But all of the games that we did, whether it would be Astro Chase or Bristles, Flip and Flop, even Spy vs. Spy, the violence is, very humorous and comic book like.
Yeah.
And that's the great thing about Boulder Dash. I'm happy. I was happy when my kids were 8 years old and they were playing it with their friends, and then in college when they would show it to some of their friends who hadn't seen it, and yes, as time goes on, it's very rewarding.
It's a timeless design, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, I mean, it's amazing. First Star is still going today. I mean, what you kind of up to in the company now? What's kind of, is there anything coming up that we should look out for?
Sure. Well, I retired in 2018 from being active, and we sold the copyrights. Well, we sold the entire intellectual property for Boulder Dash and most of our other titles to BG Entertainment. I've been very much involved with Stefan Berensen, who is the owner of the company, as he's been behind the scenes getting the next iteration ready, which has just come out recently, the Atari VCS version of Boulder Dash Deluxe. And there have been some talks, I don't know where they are, about a VR version. So that may or may not be happening. I haven't been involved. I hope it does, because I have played Boulder Dash VR in my head for decades. So,
Yeah.
And they may not even, the design that they may go with may not be that design, but I'm convinced there's a way to do it where you get around the obvious problem of, well, how do you see far enough ahead that you can, have it still be the strategy game where you are planning, what you're going to, where you're going to go and what you're going to do well enough in advance that it retains that strategy element.
I'm just picturing looking up and seeing a boulder falling down towards you in VR. That'd be quite the experience.
Yeah, it definitely would. or seeing, the equivalent of a firefly or a butterfly, chasing you, coming at you. I think when the technology gets to where it needs to, and with the proper design, it will be fabulous. And again, I don't know if there is anything in the works, but I would love to see esports, competitive versions. There are network versions, and I think that I think watching Boulder Dash is actually very exciting. Watching people play.
Absolutely. Well, long may it continue, Richard.
Thank you.
Like I said, timeless design. And thank you so much for coming on and being our guest and sharing some of your stories. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you.
A pleasure and an honor for me. Thank you so much. And good luck with the series, guys. I mean, I don't know, what are you, 280? What episode are you up to?
Yeah, well, we're not far off 300 now. I think about 285 this will be. Yeah,
85. So. Fantastic. Yeah. Well, continued success, and thank you for this opportunity to walk down memory lane.